The following program was made possible through the generous support of John and Margaret Deeks, Wendy Deeks, in memory of Peter A. Deeks, as well as the following donors: the Browning Watt Foundation, Nona MacDonald Heaslip, Joe and Marie Heffernan, Michael and Mary Ellen Hogan, Donna and Richard Ivy, Alice and Ted Kernahan, Richard and Gail McGraw, the Bruce H. Mitchell Foundation, the North Pine Foundation, Eleanor and Francis Shen, the 63 Foundation, and by the Central Canadian Public Television Association.
Hello and welcome to the final episode of our second season of Canada Files. I'm Jim Deeks, and before we get into this episode, I just want to remind you that you can see all previous editions of our series on pbs.org or canadafiles.ca or on YouTube. Now, our guest on this finale is a Canadian legend and an icon of popular music around the world for nearly 60 years, Gordon Lightfoot. Now 82 years old, Gordon has a music legacy that is probably unmatched in Canadian history, and it continues today with the recent release of his 21st album called Solo. As a huge fan, it is truly an honor for me to have this opportunity. Gordon Lightfoot, it is such a pleasure to have you here on Canada Files and in person. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Most of our guests would be well known to our American audiences, but you must certainly be the best known Canadian who's never actually moved to the United States and forged a career there. And I want to make that actually my first question. Why have you steadfastly stayed in Canada and lived here in Toronto even after you became a star in the mid-1960s?
It was not necessary to do that. All of my relatives and everybody were in this area. We're in Toronto. And Orillia, the little town 80 miles to the north, and I was actually quite content to stay here. And I really love Canada. I love my country.
You know, you're invariably described as a Canadian songwriter, but would you say that most of your songs are Canadian, and perhaps more so than some of your contemporaries like Joni Mitchell or Robbie Robertson or Neil Young, all of whom moved to the United States a long, long time ago?
Yeah, not particularly. There were a lot of songs that with a Canadian flavor to them, and of course to feel that I got from being a part of the folk revival by listening to people like Ian and Sylvia and Ramblin' Jack Elliott and Josh White Jr. and Phil Oakes and Bob Dylan, and I was sort of in that bag. Not particularly Canadian, but there were some areas where I really did press in on the Canadian theme, such as the Canadian Railroad Trilogy. That of course was done with a full orchestra and with a Canadian theme right to the core. And other tunes with the Canadian feel from having the influence of the Maritimes on me, and Stompin' Tom Connors and people like that were part of my influence. He was a great writer. Tom wrote 700 or 800 songs. He was very Canadian. Yeah. I guess it was in my style too, and I was kind of reserved. Some people used to think I was. What was it my manager used to say? I can't think of the word, but just kind of a little bit ornery, or maybe not as easy to deal with as perhaps some of the other little feisty, on the feisty side.
Let's go back to the beginning. As you mentioned, Orillia was your home. It's about 80 miles north of Toronto, and you grew up there in the 40s and 50s. And I remember Orillia well. And back in the 1950s, it was a pretty sleepy town of about 12,000 people, and certainly not the kind of town that you would expect a troubadour like Gordon Lightfoot to come out of. Were you a musical child prodigy in Orillia back in those days?
Well, Orillia had a dance band. And when I was in high school, I got a job singing with a dance band. But before that, I got started by the time I was about 4 or 5 years old to show a certain musical aspiration, shall we say. Singing on my grandmother's kitchen table, surrounded by aunts and uncles and things like that. I was encouraged. I liked listening to the radio. You know, I did. I listened to, strangest of all, the very first thing I ever listened to was classical music. Mozart. I was like, it's just way back in the far reaches of memory that I remember listening to Mozart, before anything I ever heard. It was almost like it was a gift from God, you know, that it was there for me to indulge in.
As you started to get serious about your music and
right
writing
then and
songs,
there, yeah, always.
As you did, who were some of the early influences on the music that you began to create?
Who my parents loved? Bing Crosby, for heaven's sake. So the first time I ever did a little radio show up in Orillia, which I did, I picked 5 of Bing Crosby's Irish-oriented songs that he used to do. And it worked out quite well. Except the next day, the music teacher told me that I sounded a little bit like a little frog when I sang on the radio. And, you know, my mother actually called her up on the phone and gave her a piece of her mind about that.
You know, over the last 60 years, Canada has produced some of the biggest stars in the music business, including yourself. But back in the late 1950s, when you were, you know, going through your formative years, there really weren't any famous Canadians. Paul Anka in the late 50s started to get some airplay, but recording artists, Canadian recording artists, were very, very few and far between. Was it your ambition, say in the late 1950s, that one day you'd be a famous recording artist?
Not really then. I couldn't realize the possibility in my mind of that actually happening. I had not reached that point yet. Then I did not start writing songs yet either at that point.
But you did ultimately start writing songs, and I want to ask you, who was the first big name to
Hank Williams.
To record a Gordon Lightfoot song?
The first, okay, Ian and Sylvia.
Okay, and they were certainly big in Canada.
They were huge in the folk revival.
They were
absolutely huge.
Which was their Gordon Lightfoot
song? They
had
5 albums. For Lovin' Me.
Yep.
They did
That's
2.
what you get.
Early Morning Rain and For Lovin' Me.
Was that a huge thrill to hear your song on the radio, performed by Ian and Sylvia?
See, they were with a management firm in the States, and they also managed Peter, Paul, and Mary, and they passed the songs on to Peter, Paul, and Mary. And For Lovin' Me went up to like number 2 or number 3 in the Billboard chart, so I got offered a management contract. It's one of the reasons why it was not necessary for me to relocate in stateside. And Toronto was a pretty big city right then.
You started, as you mentioned, to get recognition for your own music on the radio in the mid-1960s with songs like Early Morning Rain, For Lovin' Me, which you recorded yourself, Ribbon of Darkness, which was recorded by other artists, The Way I Feel. How did you react to fame at that point? Because it was all quite quick. You weren't an overnight sensation, but it was all quite quick that it started to happen for you. How did you react to it at the time?
By the time 1967, which is the area that you're talking about now, I had gotten a deal with United Artists, and I made 5 albums with them. And during that period of time came some of the songs that you're speaking about now, like The Way I Feel and stuff. That was when I started getting the cover recordings, because I wasn't coming with any hit singles, but lots of songs, and the songs were being absorbed by everybody right up to Elvis Presley. So the first time I heard an Elvis Presley song by me. I was driving from my mother's house in my car down from Aurelia to Toronto one Sunday, and I heard it on the radio. I just about jumped out of the car.
Which one was it?
Early Morning Rain. But there were many other titles, many other titles that got covered. I could get into it most. The one that really hits me the biggest was Black Day in July, about the Detroit riots that occurred in 1967 by Gordon Downey, and Tragically Hip had a wonderful version of that song. So did I. On my record, the record company released it as a single. I didn't know if they should have done that or not. It was very political. I'm a Canadian. Fortunately, they banned it on CKLW in Windsor, which is right across the river from Detroit. And they said, well, we can't play this because it's got a racial thing happening. And in those days, we didn't even think about what they're thinking about these days, about racism. I mean, I don't even think people even know what it is.
Well, beyond those songs and getting into the 70s, you had a number of other hits. I mean, songs like Beautiful, which I think is still one of the most beautiful songs you've ever written. If You Could Read My Mind, Sundown, Carefree Highway, I'm getting now into the 70s. And then, of course, we get up to 75 with The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, which may have been your biggest hit, I don't know, but it's certainly probably the one that's still played the most on radio today. That made you a worldwide star, those songs, and got you touring around the world. Was this the best time of your life, or would you have, as you sort of said, you were kind of a homebody, would you just have preferred to kind of stay at home and write in the basement?
We did 70, 80 shows a year, always. We were always doing shows. We traveled back and forth all across North America about 10 times.
Did you love it?
Sure. We could do it in a way that it was comfortable to do it. For the first 5 years, it was not like that, but after it got comfortable doing it, it became like you used to look forward to getting out there and doing it every time. And they would be done in segments. We'd go out 7, 8 times a year, and we'd do like a dozen shows, 10 shows, 12 shows. I had an agent who would book me any night of the week, Monday through Sunday, so we could work all the nights that we wanted to work. Never had to spend any time laid up in hotel rooms. It was all planned, and it's still the same agent. Right now, during the pandemic, it just keeps rolling the dates forward as we go, and we're doing it now like through pay television. It's fun doing it that way.
Where did you, or even to this day, where do you most like to perform? I mean, what kind of venues? Do you prefer the coffee houses or concert halls or arenas?
Well, I like them. I like so many of them so much. So many great cities. Massey Hall in Toronto, I've done 70 shows in there altogether. Altogether, it was 70 shows over the years. Royal Albert Hall in London, I mean, my goodness, I played there 4 or 5 times. Festival Hall in London. But the one that I really loved doing most was the Universal Amphitheater in Los Angeles. You get about 5,000 people on those beautiful California nights, and I would go in there for 3 or 4 nights. And we'd be sold out every night, and the feel of doing those shows at the Universal Amphitheater, Massey Hall, Royal Albert Hall. Go to Chicago, you want to go to Alaska, do you want to go to Hawaii, do you want to go to Australia? Yes. Do you want to go to Europe? Yes, we do. Yes, we will. Do you want to go to Britain? Yes, we will. And we did many times. Much more than once, maybe 4 or 5 times, maybe.
Were there any performers that you liked to perform either on stage with or on the same bill with, or did you prefer just to go out on a stage and sit on a stool with your guitar and just be a solo?
Well, we shared with many people. John Denver, we did shows together. Harry Chapin, James Taylor. You know, we did shows where we were all on the same bill. Did I get involved? I didn't get involved to the point where Christopherson got where he actually became part of the act with Willie, where he like get into it. But that was Chris.
You know, it's always astounded me that as prolific as you have been in writing songs and performing, even up to this day, and you're so talented as a writer, it's astounding, as I say, that you actually didn't really have a big hit single after the Edmund Fitzgerald in the mid-'70s. And you know, you're still recording albums. I wonder whether you got frustrated after that by the 1980s, the fact that the merry-go-round of hit making had sort of stopped for you.
You know, I figured I was lucky up to that point in time, that I'd been pretty darn lucky, you know, up until that point. So, but I kept working, but it got a little bit more spaced out. I got close with one called Baby Step Back, which I wrote on the golf course one day, which almost...
Yeah, you're standing in my line, baby, step back? No.
Yeah, step back, but yeah, I want to putt.
I want to talk about your new album. You're 82 years old. Not many 82-year-olds are recording albums, but you have just recorded and released a new album called Solo. It's your 21st album. Tell us a little bit about that record.
That is what they call in-studio material. We found some stuff that with great vocals, good songs. The whole thing would have been, I would have rewritten the whole thing. I thought about doing that too, but here's the deal. You see, nobody's getting any younger. And I wondered if I wanted to put myself through that. And then all of a sudden, boom, the pandemic kicks in. So the stuff sounded so good to me that I said, this in studio material, let's just do it. It's got guitar and vocal. God, on one of the tunes I can hear my left foot going. You know, they're all demos. It's what they are.
So it's raw.
And it's raw. It's really in-studio raw material. But people listening to it could certainly learn how to play the guitar and use the 5 chords, because it explores everything that I do on guitar. It's actually quite, it will be quite educational for a lot of people who follow my work and try to find out how I go about doing it, and my tuning system and my capoing system and all these things that come into this. They can learn from this record, so I'm glad about that part of it.
Well, I bet you've done 60 years of learning. I'm sure every album is just a little bit step further ahead than perhaps the last one was. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
Let's get off the stage for a moment and into your personal life a bit. I have never met anyone who has been publicly declared dead in my life, and in fact, in your case, it's happened twice, and I don't mean to be facetious about it. The first time was in the fall of 2002, and that, in fact, was a very serious episode in your life. Tell us a little bit about what happened then.
It's very fortunate that I'm sitting here talking to you today.
I'll buy that.
Let's put it that way. I was out of work for 28 months. 28 months I was out of work. The main thing was I came out of it with another album. When it was all was said and done, I'm back on the road and I'm back on tour again. And for the last 10 years, we've been back doing 75, 80 shows a year again, since about 2010 or 29.
Did that serious near-death experience?
So I got over it. I beat it. I got over it. It was an aortal aneurysm.
Did that experience, though, have a profound effect on your approach to life?
No, it just it told me that I remember 6 weeks when I don't remember anything.
Assuming that you do depart this earth, it will happen sometime, but how do you think you would like to be remembered by the world? Not by your family, but by the world. How do you want the Gordon Lightfoot legacy to sound?
I would like to be remembered as a decent individual.
Period, end of
Yeah,
story.
that's end of story on that one.
You've won so many awards through your career and so many honors. You have been awarded the Order of Canada, which is our country's highest honor. You've been elected to the Canadian Music Hall of Fame. You're in the National Songwriters Hall of Fame in New York. Your songs have been recorded by pretty much all the big musical recording artists of the last 50 years. Is there one award or honor that stands out for you more than the others?
Order of Canada, you know, being received by Roland Michener and getting to meet Pierre Trudeau and Margaret and those people, and Justin when he was just a boy, 8 years old, our present Prime Minister now, working on Canada Day celebrations in Ottawa, that sort of thing. I mean, we had so many great things to do. It was, you know, it was unbelievable.
Well, I don't think there's a Canadian artist who's been more honored than you have. Let me move again to another section of this interview, because I know that my audience would think I would be very remiss if I didn't ask a few questions that I know they would want me to ask. So with your permission, I want to kind of go through a rapid fire round of sort of things that we may not know from or about Gordon Lightfoot. First of all, your favorite Gordon Lightfoot song as recorded by Gordon Lightfoot.
Okay. If You Could Read My Mind.
Good one. Your favorite Gordon Lightfoot song as recorded by somebody else.
Ian and Sylvia, Early Morning Rain.
Perfect. These are good
I'm
answers.
going right back to the...
That's going back to about 1962. Huh?
Yeah.
Your favorite male performer.
Bob Dylan.
Your favorite female performer.
Judy Collins.
Your favorite group.
I really loved the band. They were one of my all-time favorites.
Your favorite kind of music that you listen to other than folk and pop.
Well, right now, with Drake living across the street, I've been listening to more hip-hop.
Okay. Your best friend.
They write great songs. They write great songs. They do.
The lyrics of hip-hop are amazing.
The artists in hip-hop music.
Who's your best friend in the music business?
Bob Dylan.
Your favorite place to be?
On stage at Massey Hall. It is. It's big.
No surprise, you've played there over 70 times.
Oh, yeah, 70 times there.
What comes first when you're writing a song, the melody or the lyrics?
First you get the chords, the chord progression. Well, there are 2 or 3 ways of starting. Sometimes you can start with a title, just a title. I did a lot of that. If you're just going to go into it and feel your way into it, it's first a chord progression, then the melody, and then a marriage takes place between the lyric and the melody.
Tell us something interesting about Gordon Lightfoot that very, very few people know.
I'm a wilderness adventurer, and I have participated in and organized 10 expeditions into the subarctic of Canada by canoe.
That is something that
10 trips,
we wouldn't have known.
10 different trips over a period of 17 years. I did that.
I'm going to ask you the last question. It's one I ask all our guests on Canada Files, and I would really be interested in hearing your response. What does being Canadian mean to you?
It means I love the place and I don't want to leave it.
That's it?
Yes.
Well, that's probably as good a place to stop as any. Gordon, it's just been a delight to talk to you, and thank you for 60 years of making Canadians really proud. Thank you, too, for joining us on Canada Files and for your support during this season. We hope we'll see you next time, but until then, stay well and stay safe and be kind to each other. See you next time.
The preceding program was made possible through the generous support of John and Margaret Deeks, Wendy Deeks, in memory of Peter A. Deeks, as well as the following donors: the Browning Watt Foundation, Nona MacDonald Heaslip, Joe and Marie Heffernan, Michael and Mary Ellen Hogan, Donna and Richard Ivy, Alice and Ted Kernahan, Richard and Gail McGraw, the Bruce H. Mitchell Foundation, the North Pine Foundation, Eleanor and Francis Shen, the 63 Foundation, and by the Central Canadian Public Television Association.